Well, for Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated, I'm Brendan Gulick along with Brett Hiltbrand, and this is certainly not the moment that Ohio State fans anticipated. Frankly, it's not the moment that you and I, Brett, had hoped for. But boy, we certainly talked about it in our preview of this game.
I warned you.
This was a tough draw, man, and Oral Roberts as a 15 seed becomes the 9th 15 seed all time to beat a 2 seed. Ohio State loses in overtime, 75-72. And let's break this one down. And, look, Brett, obviously not perfect, not a great game by any stretch of the imagination. There were instances where Ohio State was probably playing okay enough to win. But when you turn it over 12 times in the second half and in overtime, when you only hit 5 of 23 three-pointers and what was it, 9 of 18 from the free throw line, boy, it's hard to win in March when you have numbers like that.
You're absolutely right. Let me ask you this. What direction do we want to go in here off the very start? Do we want to think big picture, or do we want to get into kind of the nitty-gritty of this game?
Whatever way you want to go.
Okay, so I first of all, big picture, I think you can talk about this was just a classic case of underseeding a good team in that we've seen time and time again in the NCAA tournament. And that's not a 15 seed there, that Ohio State's playing today. All that being said, that 15 seed didn't play well this afternoon and still beat the 2-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes. Like that, they flat out didn't play well and smacked them around for a good portion of this game. It's just not good. Ohio State was playing 3-on-5 on offense at times, 2-on-5 for stretches as well. You heard Chris Holtmann say in the post-game press conference, one of 2 of them that he did. So full credit for him for doing the second one with the OSU local media. That the Oral Roberts just flat out stopped guarding Ohio State players to run doubles into the post on EJ Liddell. That's just if you're a head coach, that's got to be the most alarming thing that you can maybe think of on a basketball court. Is that, especially if you're a Power 5 team, is that a mid-major is not respecting more than half of your basketball team to literally do a fundamental thing called make a basketball shot. That's a problem. But I mean, all that being said, this was just they got beat by a better team. Wally Zerbiak said on CBS after the game that for stretches they had the 2 best players on the court.
They did,
and I don't. If you watch that game, I don't know how you don't think that it was simultaneous. It's kind of interesting because it's an onion of a game. It was simultaneously a complete choke job by Ohio State in this game, while also being a decidedly kind of one-sided affair for Oral Roberts in a way. Like it's funny how it's a little bit nuanced there. This is not necessarily look at the box score, circle a couple things, and go, there you go. That's why team A won or lost.
Well, speaking of the box score, we'll pull that up as we continue to talk here. And look, Ohio State did not play well enough to win this game, but the numbers that jump out to me right away are on Dwayne Washington's line. He started out by hitting his first 4 baskets, and unfortunately, he went 3 of 17 the rest of the way. That's pretty tough. EJ Liddell, 23 points, 10 of 15 shooting. The rest of the team went 19 of 52 from the floor, which is, certainly under 40%. I think it's roughly 36%. And obviously those big turnover numbers late really hurt. If we look at some more, specific Ohio State stats, I'd be interested to see what the points in the paint total was in the first half, because I really don't think Ohio State did nearly enough driving to the basket early in the game. They were settling for, frankly, open, but just not the kind of jump shots that you typically see this offense take. I thought
they're bad shots. They're bad.
Yeah.
Shots.
And there's a difference between taking a good shot and a bad shot. whether or not you're open. Like, I don't think every open shot is a good shot. And I don't think every contested shot is a bad shot. So I don't want to get misconstrued there. But, like, for example, there were a couple times where CJ Walker pulled up in transition and would, like, shoot from the elbow when I thought he probably could have gotten to the rim, and he missed. Those are things that stick out in my mind. Again, at the end of regulation, when Washington had a chance to win it, and the two looks that Justin Arns and that Dwayne had at the end of overtime to try and tie it, I thought those were all good looks. I don't have problems with those. Sometimes you just get beat. I mean, 3 of 12 for Dwayne is not his best performance. And look, man, you've kind of lived and died by him all year long, right? I mean, in the Big Ten tournament, he put the Buckeyes on his back, literally. 92 points was an all-time Big Ten tournament record. And they rode him hard and nearly won the Big Ten title. And now, you try to ride him again in the NCAA tournament, and he gets off to a good start. But after the 11 points in the first half, and again, hitting 4 of 4 to start, goes 3 of 17 the rest of the way. And a couple of those were layups. I mean, he basically missed almost every jump shot he took the rest of the game.
He did. And also, if you're going to look at Dwayne's line, to me, the 3 of 12 doesn't jump out as much as the 1 for 3 from the free throw line. Those 2 misses are the game, period, point blank. Late in that second half, he goes up and throws out 2 absolute bricks from the free throw line in a spot where you almost kind of think they're a given, right? Like you almost just assumed to put 2 points on the board. You're absolutely right about those points in the paint. I think it was when Chris Holtmann made a point afterward to kind of talk about how they didn't have a ton of time between, there wasn't enough time to accurately reflect and then give a proper opinion on some certain things, what the season's accomplished, all of that. But I also don't necessarily think there was enough time for him to properly digest some of the missed opportunities that Ohio State had. Some of the things that they were really succeeding at that they got away from at times. It felt like to me, EJ Liddell could get literally anything he wanted in the paint for 4 or 5 minute stretches, and then all of a sudden the ball stopped going into him. And that was because, Oral Roberts didn't have to guard Musa Jallow. They didn't have to guard Justice Suing. They were telling CJ Walker, shoot any 3 you want, buddy. Like, when was the last time you ever saw that in the NCAA tournament where your point guard is literally not getting run off the 3-point line? That's mind-boggling to me. That there were a couple times where in the first half, and we texted back and forth about this, that CJ had a couple open looks for 3 that he just flat out passed up. And that's probably the 3rd or 4th time I've noticed him doing that multiple times in a game. So, it was that there were a lot of missed opportunities for Ohio State to go out and survive in advance, if you will. The crazy thing to me is, if you pull up Oral Roberts' box score here on their side of things, look at their 3-point shooting percentage, 31.4.
Yeah, way lower than their typical numbers.
If they shoot average, Ohio State gets beat by like 20 in this game.
Yeah.
And that's I think kind of the point I'm trying to make here, in that, like, Ohio State probably should have won this game directly resulted by Oral Roberts shooting the basketball pretty poorly for the most part in this game. If Oral Roberts shoots anything close to what they've been doing over the majority of the season, Ohio State gets embarrassed in this game.
And I think the Buckeyes, yeah, I agree, but I think the Buckeyes do deserve some credit for some of the defense they played, because
absolutely.
They definitely they did a way better job against Max Asmus after halftime. I think they made him earn his threes, 3-point shot attempts the rest of the way. I can't remember. I think he either had 4 or 5 at halftime, so he only had 1 the rest of the way, if any. But I mean, look, it was an O'Banner driven second half and overtime for sure. But
and that's why Zed Key didn't play much in the second half. He struggled to get out on O'Banner and get a hand up and contest those shots when he was really filling it up from 3 early on in the first half. That's why Zed didn't play much in the second, because he was really struggling with some of those closeout and contests.
I mean, look, man, O'Banner and Thompson and Asmus and Jurgens played 42 plus minutes. O'Banner and Asmus never came off the floor. I mean, you want to talk about a team that basically said, this is what we got. We don't really care, that how we're going to play. We're going to try to go give it our all and see if it's good enough today. And, they never stopped shooting threes, even though their percentage was significantly down. Maybe as a counter to what you said, if Ohio State makes, anywhere close to the average of 76% from the free throw line they've been all year, instead of 9 out of 18, the game may never have gone to overtime, and the Buckeyes might have won in regulation.
Absolutely. Same thing with Ohio State from 3. If Ohio State, they shot 21.7% from 3. If Ohio State's in the 30s, they win this game decidedly.
Yep, 5 out of 23 from 3 and 50% from the free throw line really hurt. I mean, it was obviously a tough game, but it was kind of a perfect storm of things that went wrong. Chris Holtmann said it after the game. Nobody really wants to hear it that, hey, this is a really good 15 seed. They're better than, people give them credit for. But I think that's fact. I really do think it's true. When this bracket came out, I started to look at Oral Roberts. I did a preview with their play-by-play radio voice, Adam Hildebrand, and, really got a vibe that, hey, man, this team can let it rip, and they play fearlessly. They're not concerned with trying to play your game. They're going to dictate the tempo, and Ohio State played much faster in that first half than they've played it most times throughout the course of the year. Most of the teams in the Big Ten don't play as fast as Oral Roberts tried to play today. And I think that hurt Ohio State. They might have felt like they had to take some shots because they were open and the rhythm of the game was just moving at a certain clip.
Totally agree.
Ohio State up a little bit.
Yeah. And also, we have talked about this. If you've been tuning in to our videos over the last month and change, you've kind of heard me harp this a little bit, that I've been really worried about the legs for the Ohio State Buckeyes over the last 3+ weeks. And an up-tempo game is like a disaster for them, especially given what I called in the most recent video we did, the worst case scenario for them in the Big Ten conference tournament, which was go all the way to the conference championship game and then lose it. It was very obvious to me, and you can look at the minute by minute scoring, and you can literally see right where Ohio State lost its legs in the first half. It's about 7 minutes in, that all that juice, that adrenaline from the opening tip and all of that, it just plateaus. And Oral Roberts, really, it was kind of like I tweeted it during the game. It was the gold medal game in the bad shot Olympics. From about the 14th minute on to maybe like the 6th or 7th minute in the first half, neither team could do anything offensively, and that was the opportunity right there for Ohio State to, that game could have been over in that 5 to 7 minute stretch. That you be a little bit more efficient on offense, and you go up 15, you go up 18 right there. You don't and the game's, it's not maybe over, but you feel so much more comfortable. And I think that would have been massive for this Ohio State team, given kind of the leg weariness that I expected that they had right now. And then in the second half, you can look at it the same deal. That in the second half, they come out and I think it was a 17-4 run by Oral Roberts.
19-4 is what I had.
19-4 run. I mean, there was just no juice. And, and that is, I think when we get a little bit of time, distance between, the finality of this game, to really get a proper perspective, we're going to look back on Ohio State's last 3-4 weeks of the season and realize just that, how much of a grind that was and how much it kind of doomed their NCAA tournament chances because of how backloaded the regular season schedule was with tough, physical, dominant teams. And then the run they go on in the Big Ten tournament, a run that they maybe didn't, quote unquote, need to go on. They just did. You want to look at, Dwayne Washington, if you're on Twitter, he's getting a lot of hate right now from Ohio State fans. And I'm always hesitant to criticize college athletes because I don't think that's fair if you're not getting paid for it.
Sure.
Period, point blank. And I would say, college players, regardless of the sport, are allowed to play poorly in moments and be free of criticism from Joe Schmo online. That's just Bush League. But I don't think it's unfair to be able to say, X player didn't play their best. But you want to look at what Dwayne Washington is capable of. Look what he did during the Big Ten tournament, right? If Ohio State, loses and gets knocked out early, all of that juice, I think, moves itself to the NCAA tournament. And we're not talking about this game in the same way, but they just didn't have the legs. Period, point blank for me. They were beat up. The grind of the season really hurt them. And they played literally the worst possible 15 seed matchup I think that you could possibly have, even if you dip down into the 14 and 13 seeds. This was literally the one team I think you didn't want to play, and they got it. So perfect storm is the perfect way to describe what happened.
I think I would challenge you a little bit on one thing. Without a doubt, I mean, the end of the regular season, that schedule was as ridiculously hard as any schedule you're going to find. And yeah, the Buckeyes played 4 games in 4 days in the Big Ten tournament, including a couple of overtime games. With this one, it's 3 overtime games in a 5-game stretch after playing those 4 games at the end of the regular season. They played some really mentally and physically straining, tough basketball at the end of the year. And I don't disagree that it wore on them. But I'm not necessarily convinced that had the Big Ten tournament, let's say Ohio State loses to Purdue and doesn't play those 2 additional games, I don't know that they're that much fresher coming into this game. For me, it's more of a, sometimes you just draw a bad matchup. And I truly think if Kyle Young was healthy today, the Buckeyes would have won this game. I mean, it's an energy thing. It's an attitude thing. Obviously, the Buckeyes had a physicality about them today that Oral Roberts couldn't match. But Ohio State got too caught in bad instances in the first half where, like you said, they could have pulled away and didn't. There was a stretch where I think Oral Roberts had hit 1 of 8 or 1 of 9 from the field. And Ohio State only cut the deficit by a few points. Now, they only trailed by as many as 8 in that first half. It was 23-15. But, there was a stretch of probably 4 minutes where the Golden Eagles clearly had fallen flat and the Buckeyes didn't take advantage of it. So I'm not necessarily going to say that their success in the Big Ten tournament hurt them here. And the other thing I would say building off that is just, what's the goal, right? Because obviously you want to win a national championship, but I don't think I sit in the chair saying I would rather win a national title and lose a Big Ten title if that's what it took to win the national title. You played, to borrow the Herm Edwards line, you play to win the game. You're competitive. You're not promised anything. Ohio State, they had an incredible run through the Big Ten tournament that Buckeye fans are going to remember for a long time, and obviously ended on a disappointing note. But it was thrilling. It was entertaining. What Dwayne did, what he showed in that tournament was incredible. 92 points in 4 games is ridiculous. They just didn't have it today. And I'm not going to blame it on a fatigue thing. I think they just got beat.
I agree. I think fatigue is a factor. I don't know if I would necessarily place blame solely on fatigue, but I definitely think it was a factor. I think that this is like the blessing and the curse of the NCAA tournament, and even I think it's to some extent the college football playoff as well, right? That because there is this big shiny object of a national championship / tournament, that a lot of times what happens preceding that, the path that gets you to that place, good or bad, has a tendency to be diminished because of the most recent result, right? And so, I think if Ohio State, say, wins the Big Ten Conference Championship, and then the same thing happens, again, where they get beat by Oral Roberts, is everyone still as shocked and upset right now? I think the answer is yes, but maybe not to the same degree, because it felt like there was maybe still some meat on the bone, as opposed to having you at least checked one box of the expectations that you set at the beginning of the season. But I think that's kind of the beauty of this entire tournament, is that you're starting over in so many ways, right? And that once you hit the tournament, a lot of what you've done previously, especially if you're like a team that has deep tournament run / Final Four / national championship type expectations, if you don't satisfy those in the tournament, a lot of what you do, to some fans, and I would say the majority of fans, a lot of what you do leading up to that is irrelevant. And is that recency bias? Yes. Is that entirely unfair? Absolutely. But I think that's also the reality of the situation. And I think that's the beautiful mess that is, the NCAA tournament. And I think the college football playoff is the exact same thing.
Give me an idea of how this loss stacks up for you now, long-term, thinking about, the most disappointing tournament losses that Ohio State has suffered along the way in NCAA tournament history.
I would say it's really not that up there for me. Because I really try to go into games blank slate as best as I possibly can. I can't say I'm terribly surprised with this result. Just the sheer randomness of happening to watch not one but 2 Oral Roberts games in their conference championships like last week, but total happenstance, totally random that I did that. I think gave me maybe a better context and view of what that team was coming into this matchup. So I'm surprised, but maybe not shocked or flabbergasted by this end result. I think in some ways it feels very similar to Ohio State's 1 seed defeat to Kentucky. And I think, was it 2012, 2011?
Yeah,
would have been Aaron Kraft's senior year. That it felt like that in that game specifically, it felt like to me there was one team that could beat Ohio State, and it just so happened it was a Kentucky team that was drastically underseeded. And of course they go on to the Final Four, and then I think they lose in the semifinal that year. But as far as if we're ranking some of those tournament heartbreaks, I think this loss has to be way up there, right? I think in general, it absolutely has to be up there. For me personally, it's not just because I think I maybe saw part of it coming a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's a disappointment. And I also think, and we can talk about this a little bit more in a minute, this is by far now Chris Holtmann's toughest offseason, because it is very easy, because this is going to be all over the place in the college basketball world unless a 1 seed goes down in the next 24 hours, which would be literally best case scenario for Chris Holtmann in Ohio State right now. that this will be all over the place for the next like 10 days. There is a very real possibility that this hurts Ohio State in recruiting, and that this loss can be troublesome for them when it comes to bringing in talent. And it's very important for a Chris Holtmann and company to do their best to kind of keep that at bay. And that's really, that's going to be something that I think, in addition to evaluating and then finding a way to get better overall, that is also something that'll be at the forefront of their minds.
This instant analysis of today's Ohio State season finale is brought to you by Eric Mayer State Farm. Is your current insurance scenario driving you into madness? Do more than just survive and advance with Eric Mayer State Farm, an Ohio State alum. Eric and his team deliver a championship experience to Buckeye fans all across the great state of Ohio. You can give him a call today, 513-791-8000. Eric Mayer State Farm Insurance, based out of Cincinnati. So obviously this is it's a frustrating, it's a disappointing loss, Brett, but maybe some of that is just because it's the recency bias of knowing that, hey, look, this is the loss that ended the season. But again, I think Ohio State was prepared for this game. I'm not willing to sit there and say that, they didn't look ready, that the moment was too big for them. Frankly, they played a couple of really good non-conference games at the beginning of the year that might not have felt like it then, but Cleveland State goes and wins the Horizon League. Morehead State wins the automatic bid, and they're in the NCAA tournament, and obviously playing in the Big Ten. But I think the toughest part is that it just doesn't guarantee you anything. And here we are at the end of the season, but at the beginning of the tournament, and I'm not really sure that's what fans had expected.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's what in some ways to me presents maybe Chris Holtmann's biggest challenge going forward now is doing everything you can to erase this defeat and move forward. Quite frankly, if I was Chris Holtmann, a month from now, I'd call, or a month or 2 months from now, the first person I would call would be Tony Bennett of UVA. Like, how did you get over being a 1 seed, getting beat by, University of Maryland, Baltimore County? How'd you get over that to win a national championship the following year? And the quote unquote, like, hang up and listen, right? Like that, he would be my first phone call, because it's so important to put this defeat beyond, this program and then the individual coaches and players as fast as humanly possible. And we know that's not really in actuality possible, because we have however many months until, the season, the next season begins. And I think you really have to do your due diligence there in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's a brutal loss, right? Like it's a gut wrenching defeat for this team. I saw that 92 point something or other % of brackets on ESPN picked Ohio State over Oral Roberts. So all those brackets, so many people, across the country, not just Ohio State fans, but overwhelming majority of people who, both pay attention to college basketball, but also just filled out a bracket, picked the Buckeyes. And so, when you come to a full stop like that head-on collision, so to speak, it's brutal. It's brutal. And I think that's what makes maybe this offseason the most difficult one Chris Holtmann has had, certainly in his tenure at Ohio State, and maybe in his entire coaching career.
Where does this leave Kyle Young and CJ Walker for you? Because it certainly seems pretty clear to me when we heard from them at the end of senior day that this was probably it, for CJ and Kyle. CJ didn't straight out say it in his press conference before senior day, but then Chris Holtmann came on, the next day and basically said, yeah, this is CJ's last go. Kyle, I don't think has publicly said it, but kind of insinuated that, in case this is the end, this is his thoughts, and these are his thoughts and feelings around playing Ohio State basketball. Maybe it's a little prisoner of the moment, but what are your impressions of the legacy that they leave here?
I think we'll start with Kyle Young. I think we will look back on Kyle Young's Ohio State legacy in a somewhat similar way to how I think we're going to look at Jayshawn Tate. From kind of one, we'll call it regime previous, a guy that the entire team depended upon. And I think JT was a better scorer and was more dynamic on offense than Kyle was. But I think they were extremely similar in how important their leadership was to the team. And when they weren't on the floor, their presence was missed. And I think that's maybe the biggest compliment in some ways you can give to a basketball player, more so than maybe any other sport, is that, we need you for a lot of reasons, not just because of the points you score, the rebounds you grab. And so I think we'll look back on Kyle's 4 years here at Ohio State with a lot of respect. And he'll be someone that is admired for a long time because of that. So credit to him. And I think CJ Walker is another guy that I think deserves a lot of credit as well. I think for someone like CJ, who had the hand injury, and in my opinion, came back probably earlier than a lot of people expected. I would say even like doctors expected. I think that speaks to his character, right? That he felt that his presence was required even when maybe he wasn't 100%, because there was a void that needed to be filled, on this team. And he hurried back because of that. And I think both of those guys have not just shouldn't just have the respect of the team and the coaching staff. I would assume they do. In fact, I know they do. But I think fans should respect them a lot too. I think they both brought an unbelievable amount to Ohio State during this transition time to the Chris Holtmann tenure. And I think here's what I'll say: when Ohio State has success, true, tangible NCAA tournament success, because I think that is the most of everything that is going to happen with Ohio State athletics over the next however many years, with Chris Holtmann in charge of the Ohio State men's basketball program. Tangible NCAA tournament success is the most lock out of everything. Football, whatever. It is a lock. It is going to happen. And I think when that happens, you're going to look back on, players like Jayshawn Tate, players like, from a couple years ago, players like Kyle Young, CJ Walker, as being guys who helped facilitate that success and rebuild a foundation, if you will, early on, for sure. Respect to them. Absolutely.
And even beyond them too, I really think we need to talk a little bit about Chris Holtmann himself here, because, man, maybe it's just me, but I kind of felt like Coach Holtmann was taking a little heat on social media for maybe some of the sets at the end of games, or for saying that it was his fault the Buckeyes didn't shoot particularly well. And I give Coach Holtmann a ton of credit, because he is the ultimate. Put the blame on my shoulders and give the success credit elsewhere. But I didn't have any issue at all with the plays that were designed, especially in crunch time. Good looks that just for whatever reason today didn't fall.
I would encourage, if you are the person who's watching this and you're mad at Chris Holtmann, go to my Twitter right now, at Brett _Hiltbrand, and find the play that Chris Holtmann drew up for Dwayne Washington in overtime, which is basically a backside double screen to get an open look for three. It is it's a brilliant, whiteboard, dry erase board, in the timeout play. Like it's exceptional, and he gets it unbelievable look for Dwayne Washington, and it's just it just clanks off the rim and nothing happens. Like that, you can't draw up that play any better. And there were 3 or 4 of those where I thought, he really drew up some specific looks for certain guys, and they just didn't go down. And I think if you want to look at the box score and really kind of dissect it, bit by bit, 2 or 3 of those shots go down, either free throws or threes or whatever. And we're talking about this game in an entirely different context. That's how small the margins are, it felt. And I don't think Chris Holtmann, and definitely we're not talking about Chris. There are certain people who are criticizing Chris Holtmann aren't doing that if 1 or 2 of those shots go in. So I would say if you're going to criticize Chris Holtmann, if you're frustrated with him, I think you're allowed to be frustrated. I would say your frustrations may be a little bit misplaced, given that sometimes you just get beat, and I think that's just what happened today. Where there are some factors that went into that, sure, were most of them within Ohio State's control? I would say probably not. But for me, and this is where I really net out as someone who pays a lot of attention to Ohio State athletics, and more specifically pays a lot of attention to Ohio State men's basketball. Chris Holtmann is the guy for this job, period. Point blank. There isn't anyone in the country right now that I would rather have at Ohio State than Chris Holtmann. And for a number of reasons, and I can give you a lot of them. The most recent one I can give you is the fact that Chris Holtmann maybe had the most devastating loss of his entire career. Does a press conference with national media. The local media is not part of it because of a snafu at some point along the line with the NCAA. That's a different podcast for a different day. 15 minutes later, Chris Holtmann does that press conference again with local media. So not only did he have to suffer through that once, he did it twice. I can count on one hand the number of college basketball coaches that would do that. And I've been around the D1 college basketball world a decently long time, and I don't feel like I'm old enough to say that. But like one hand, the number of guys that would do that twice after suffering that traumatic of a defeat. And then on top of that, be gracious in the second one. That speaks to his character, unquestionably.
I totally agree. And yeah. Frankly, Brett, the fact that, I've noticed this about Coach Holtmann, and frankly, Ryan Day does it pretty well too. But Chris Holtmann, when he hears a question from a reporter, there's a personal way that he feels or that he approaches answering the question. He usually addresses the reporter by their first name. Mm-hmm. Most coaches don't do that, even if it's a question that he might not like or he might think it's difficult to answer in the moment. He's as respectful with the media as any coach I've been around, and especially considering the incredibly difficult circumstance of this awful moment. I found his grace really impressive in that, in that sphere. So I give him a ton of credit for the way he got it through that.
I'll tell you a quick story real quick. So Penn State beat Ohio State. Tony Carr banked in a 3 at the shoe for Penn State to beat Ohio State. And I think it was 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And I asked some pretty tough questions of Chris Holtmann because I really, after that game, didn't really like some of the offensive sets late in the game. Even though Keita Bates-Diop, literally like 2 seconds before Tony Carr hit that game-winning 3, Keita hits a big 3 from the top of the key to go ahead in that game. So what do I know? But I asked him some tough questions, and I know for a fact that Chris Holtmann maybe didn't love those questions, period, point blank, but answered them and everything was fine. Fast forward, I forget, maybe like 3 weeks, and I'm at the OHSAA boys basketball state championships at the shoe, and I'm sitting on, the basically courtside in some of the media seats, and Hoop walks out, and there's one open seat next to me, and the entire row, Chris Holtmann walks out, and I'm like, oh God, please don't sit beside me. Like, I'm not necessarily that type of guy very often, but I was like, I just go walk somewhere else. Please walk somewhere else, because I was worried that he was going to be annoyed. Matt walks right up, sits down next to me. We talk for like 25 minutes. Like 10 days earlier, I was in his face about something that I have no credibility for the most part compared to him to question whatsoever, and he couldn't have been more gracious. I mean, that was unbelievable. And I think that's the type of guy that he is, and that's good. Now, I would say having that is not just enough to be a successful coach in college basketball right now. And I think that's why I'm really adamant about him and his ability to be successful here, because he is, that gracious guy that commands respect in a really like unique way, in my opinion, in the coaching world in the NCAA Division I athletics. He does it in a unique way. On top of all of that, he's a good bleeping coach, man. Yeah. And the dude can recruit his butt off. So all of that, all encompassing, if you're looking at this from the 10,000 foot view, the all 22, if you will, or in basketball, I guess the all 10, the guy is primed to break out. And it's literally one recruiting class stacked up with another group. We're stacked with a couple veterans, and Ohio State is primed for a run over a course of several different seasons. And I don't think there's anybody at the helm of a program in the entire country that's in maybe better hands than Ohio State is with Chris Holtmann. I believe that with every ounce of my professional acumen across the landscape of college basketball.
All I would say is that teams often take on the demeanor of their coach. Chris Holtmann is ultra competitive, but he is a gentleman in a lot of ways, and he's the kind of leader that you want to represent your institution. I know Ohio State is awfully proud to have him. Look, we're not here to be cheerleaders for the Buckeyes, but I am certainly willing to recognize when someone does their job well, when they are extremely respectful, and when they're willing to face the music, when sometimes that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, we're not here to be cheerleaders. Watch the first 15. If you watch the first 15 minutes, there's no pom-poms over here. Let me tell you, none whatsoever. Yeah, and it can be both, right? Those two things can exist at the same time, unless you watch Skip Bayless and company. But that's those two situations. Those two things can coexist at once, and I think that is in a lot of ways unique with the coach to media relationship in certain markets across the country.
Well, so the Buckeyes fall short, and the season's over. I don't want to say before the tournament even began, because they had their chance for sure. But this was absolutely not the kind of NCAA tournament life and dream that the Buckeyes had. Unfortunately, the hope for maybe an all Big Ten Final Four, which was certainly a reality, at least for
I said that.
At least for one that includes Ohio State, is actually still possible, right?
Again, that's a good point.
But an all Big Ten Final Four that includes the Buckeyes is no longer in play. But hey, look, that's March Madness. That's what this time of year is all about. And in tournament time, you live and die by the three. Sometimes you live and die by the free throw line. The Buckeyes kind of did both today. They unfortunately died by both the free throw line and the 3-point line, even though Max Asmus in the first half went bananas from deep. And truly, like, right from the get-go. I mean, when he pulled up from the logo, it was like, okay, so those highlights we've seen all year long of this kid, that's not a mirage. Like, now it's the NCAA tournament, and in his first NCAA tournament, goes up from 30 feet or whatever and bangs one home. That was kind of a nice dose of reality early on.
Did you watch Florida Virginia Tech this afternoon? It's not going to be easy for them.
No. And frankly, I think both Ohio State and Oral Roberts were kind of hoping that game was going to go to several overtimes and not just one. Oral Roberts, as we showed you in the box score a minute ago, I mean, look, their starters played a lot of minutes. So they got to recover and get healthy quick before they play Florida on Sunday. But obviously, this is more of a disappointing note that the Buckeye season comes to an end. So we will certainly continue to digest and talk about this along the way as the offseason looms for Ohio State basketball. But didn't think that perhaps it was going to be after just one game. Again, the number 15 seeds against 2 seeds with today's win are now 9 and 132. For just the 9th time in tournament history, a 15 seed has beaten a 2 seed. Again, this instant analysis brought to you by our good friend Eric Mayer at State Farm Insurance. Is your current insurance scenario driving you into madness? Eric Mayer's the guy to call. Do more than survive and advance with Eric Mayer State Farm. He's an Ohio State alum. Eric and his team deliver a championship experience to Buckeye fans all across the great state of Ohio. A Cleveland native, Columbus guy, and currently in Cincinnati. Call him today, 513-791-8000. 513-791-8000. Eric Mayer, State Farm Insurance. We appreciate his support. 75-72, the final score. The Buckeyes dropped today's game in overtime. Brett, it was fun to break down most of the games with you all season long. And now that spring football is officially today underway, we'll certainly have some football to talk about here in the near future. But in the meantime, putting a bow on the end of the NCAA tournament. Not the way the Buckeyes hoped it would end, but the season has come to a close. All right, we'll see you again real soon. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's certainly available if you're watching here now or just Buckeyes Now on YouTube. You can find us on social media or at BuckeyesNow.com. We'll see you again next time. This is Instant Analysis here, Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated.